So, the Beastmen have finally got their update, but to all of our surprise, the Dwarfs have also had a bit of an update too. So we're going to look at what's changed for both of those factions, but I'm not allowed to talk about the Silence and Fury DLC yet. This is just about the Beastmen rework and what's changing with the Dwarfs. So, let us begin. So first of all, let's start with the Beastmen. What's new for the Goatmen? Wait, what is that? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Oh, scheisse! It's Malagor! Malagor can now fly. It's taken 5 years, but he's finally figured out how to use those wings, and Malagor is now a flying lord. It was always a little bit ridiculous that he couldn't fly with those wings, and the community has been asking for this, and here it is. Malagor is now a flying lord, which gives the Beastmen a new type of lord with a flying option. Malagor has just had a bit of a rework in general, and especially now has his own new mixed lore book of spells, which comes with Doom and Darkness from the Death lore book, Flock of Doom from the Lore of Beasts, because, you know, he's the Crowfather. From the Lore of the Wilds, which he had entirely before, he has Mantle of Gorok and Savage Dominion, so he can still summon those Cygors. And from the Lore of Shadows, he has Enfeebling Foe and Penumbral Pendulum. So a really nice mixture of spells for Malagor there, makes him a little bit more of a unique lord as well. So yeah, really nice to see Malagor get some love and to finally be a somewhat unique and viable lord for the Beastmen. Also coming is a free LC for the Great Bray Shaman, a caster lord for the Beastmen, coming in 4 variants of all the lore books they already have: Death, Wilds, Beasts and Shadows. So yeah, another lord choice coming for the Beastmen, which is really nice. It gives them the option to have that combined lord and caster in one, so they don't need to bring a hero caster as well, which is a great way to save money, and they have chariot mounts at their disposal. So yeah, nice to have some more lord choices. We've got these generic wizards like most factions have, and we've also got Malagor now being a unique flying lord, and obviously more coming in the DLC too. Another nice new addition is that Malagor now has his own faction, Harbinger of Disaster. Before, he was just lumped in with the Beastmen, and it was only Morgor that had his own faction in the Warherd of the Shadowgave. So yeah, small thing, but it is nice that he does get his own faction now. And of course, the Beastmen campaign has had its rework, and now I have to say it is a damn fun campaign, right up my street personally, because it's just non-stop assaults on everybody. They are still a horde, which hasn't really worked great in the past, but what they've done to it now has really made it much more interesting. So first of all, you don't have any recruitment or upkeep costs for your units. Much like the Tomb Kings, some units are completely free, others are capped to a certain amount which can be upgraded so you can get more over time. You can see here I've got 3 of 5 Chaos Spawn that I can get, 0 of 4 Ungor Herd. So it makes acquiring full armies pretty easy, and also better and stronger units much easier as well, because you don't have to worry about paying for them, you just need to get the unit cap. So that's the first big thing. Next is the freedom that you have from the Herdstone system. As you can see, I've been tearing a path through the old world. You are able to take settlements in a way now, but you don't really hold on to them. You create Herdstones and then you raise everything else around it, and it becomes difficult for all the other factions to take that land back. So I started down here. This is a Khazrak campaign. I started here, raised this up, raised the settlements around, and how this works is when you take any settlement, if you have a Herdstone available, you can use it in a settlement. That'll turn it into a ritual site, like so, and this will give it a garrison, it will give it buffs to the land, all stuff that helps it out, but only if you have a Herdstone shard available, which you do get as you progress. So you get loads of stuff, you get a nice big garrison, so it's quite easy to defend with these pretty decent and large garrisons. And on top of that, there are some buildings which you can construct to make the land better or worse in some way for either you or the enemy. Obviously better for you, worse for the enemy. Those can all help you out, like replenishment, line of sight. You can make enemy towers do less damage and things like that. And what you need from this ritual site, though, you can see this number here, 38. This is all the marks of ruination I will get once I perform this ritual, and these are gathered from the surrounding settlements. You can see all the numbers, a 6 here, there's a 0 from the other ones because I've raised those already. Nuln has 0, I've taken that and it's been added to my 38. This was probably 6, this was probably 6, and those 6s have gone into this number to create that 38, and I could take Flensburg here, come over here, raise it up, and then that 6 will be added onto my 38, giving me that 44, so that when I press perform ritual, it will be added on to my marks of ruination, which is the bar up the top. We'll look at that in a second. So when I hit perform ritual, it says If I do this, I won't be able to undo it, and I won't be able to add any more points to that place if I perform the ritual. So you want to kind of take all the places out around you and then do the ritual to get the most out of them. And all that stuff is converted to marks of ruination. You can see here it goes along this bar, and this is where I can unlock more unit caps so I can get more of each kind of unit, and also more armies so I can get 2, 3, 4 more hordes running around. And to actually win the campaign, you do have to get to the end of this bar so that you can unlock the final battle, which is one of the victory requirements. So that is the main part of the campaign, running around, raising stuff up, getting the points, getting the marks of ruination, converting them with rituals. And for other campaign victory objectives, you have to fight like 100 battles, do some raiding, take out certain factions as usual. In this case, it's the Empire for Khazrak, and win that final battle. So pretty standard objectives, but you just run around, smash everyone to pieces, get those rituals done, get the marks of ruination, victory. And one of the best things about all of this is wherever you have your herdstone in the province, the other settlements that you've raised in that same province will not be takeable by any other faction. They cannot take Nuln until they take out my herdstone at Wissenberg. So you can really just leave chaos wastes all over the place, and there's nothing the enemies can do about it. They can try and take the herdstone, but they do get 20 garrisons there eventually with a few upgrades. So yeah, it's all about just tearing through the enemy lands and making it really hard for them to take their lands back as well. It is goddamn fun. We also have this currency, Dread, which is built up through various means, and we're going to use it for various things. Namely, upgrading our unit caps is a big one. This is where we can get more of certain kinds of units. You can only get 1 or 2 Minotaurs to start with, for example, but use your Dread, you can get 3, 4, 5, whatever. But not all of these upgrades are going to be available straight away. You have to work your way through that Marks of Ruination bar to be able to get all of them. So that's the first thing that you're going to be using Dread for. It's acquired from battles and passively and various other things as well. And you can also use it to recruit other legendary lords. You basically absorb their faction into yours and confederate them. You can also increase your hero caps as well. There's also the upgrades panel, which is just kind of some random upgrades. For the herdstone especially, these are good ones. These allow you to have a bigger garrison, which makes them a lot easier to defend if someone should come and try to take them. And then various other upgrades to your armies and hordes, which can be useful. There's also an items tab, but this one doesn't use the Dread currency. This is just bought with your gold that you've pilfered from all the lands you've destroyed. Got some pretty good items in here. This one increases campaign movement and sight, which is handy. This one can give you vanguard deployment, but this one down here is probably the best one. Gives you regeneration and perfect vigor, and not to mention a ward save and melee attack to whoever you put this on. It's pretty expensive, but you can give all of your lords and heroes regeneration, basically. It's pretty nutso. So yeah, lots of useful stuff to spend not only your Dread on, but also your gold on as well. And that stuff all serves, of course, to make you absolutely disgusting, as beastmen should be. And that is about the gist of it. You've still got the full moon mechanic, so you can still get the buffs when the full moon's around. You still have the bestial rage as your growth. You've still got, I think, the same stances as before, so not a lot else has changed other than these main big things, but really nice rework to the beastmen. This might be my new favorite campaign. I love that you just get to have the freedom to run off wherever you want, smash whoever you want. You don't need to worry about the lands you've already lost. If your ritual sites get taken, you don't lose the marks of ruination or anything. So you don't need to worry about your ritual sites and your herdstones after you've performed the ritual. Doesn't matter if they get destroyed and taken over. It just means that the enemy factions will be able to take the land again, but who cares? You're the beastmen. You're off somewhere else by the time they've done that. So yeah, really impressed with the Beastmen rework. I like what they've done with it. They did a good job with the Wood Elves rework as well, so CA are on point with their reworks so far. So, Beastmen rework is good. Looks like they should be returning to some former glory. The faction as a whole as well, the roster has been updated. It's had some buffs, it's had some balancing. I don't know exactly what yet because I don't have the patch notes, but they've said they have gone over the Beastmen roster to try and make it more up to date with the strength of other factions. So we've all got that to look forward to. Also, of course, the new units will be coming in the DLC, which is going to jazz the Beastmen up even more. So it's nice to see the goats becoming potentially the goats. Now for the moment, all you dwarf lovers have been waiting for, news on the dwarf update. To be clear first of all though, it is a dwarf update, not a rework. There are some fairly significant changes, but it's not a full makeover like for the Beastmen. Their campaign mechanics still work mostly the same. There have been some changes on things like skill trees and such, but they're not getting whole new mechanics like the Beastmen. And of course, no new units. Except for new legendary lord, Thorek Ironbrow. Master runesmith, of which there is a whole new system for runes, which we'll look at in a second. Thorek himself is pretty tough in the melee, lots of armor, leadership, and good melee defense, as you would expect from any dwarf, but also pretty good weapon strength, which is armor piercing, so he can do his work in melee, but where he's really going to shine is with the use of his Rune Magic. But he does come with an Anvil of Doom mount, which has also had a bit of a rework. Stats wise, it mostly makes him more tanky, giving him an extra 1000 health pretty much, and a little bit of extra melee defense, albeit at the cost of a bit of speed, and he also gains a physical resistance. So he is pretty tough, but won't really get away from anything at only 30 speed. However, this anvil does come with the Rune of Doom, which is basically a dwarf War. It gives 24 melee attack and causes fear map wide, so every single dwarf unit is going to benefit from that, and it can be used every 2 minutes. So that's the anvil and Thorek himself. Now let's take a look at his abilities that he personally comes with, whether on the anvil or not. So first of all, he has that physical resistance. That's only from the anvil though. Got some other resistances. His first ability, Locus of Power. This is pretty nice. It does explosion damage to casters when they cast nearby. So within 100 meters, if an enemy casts a spell, they'll take damage from this explosion, Locus of Power. Pretty nice. Basically like causing a small miscast on enemy casters. Next, he has Forge Fire, which is an ability runesmiths had before, but it worked differently. Now it reduces enemy armor by 15 within 40 meters of himself as a constant AoE. So a great one, if you mix him in with the front line, he's going to bring enemy armor down and help all of your frontline units. Next, another usual runesmith ability in Rune of Hearth and Home. This, I believe, works exactly the same as it did before, gives an immunity to psychology and an AoE, nothing new there. And for Thorek's last ability, Master of the Ancient Lore. This will make his abilities cool down that little bit faster, but only after he's been engaged in melee for a while. And he also has an item, Thorek's Rune Armor, which will give armor and flame resistance to himself and nearby friendly units within 40 meters, constantly. So that is Thorek Ironbrow and all of his stats and abilities, a nice new Runesmith Legendary Lord. But now to the biggest change in this Dwarf's update, on how the rune system works. It's basically more like a magic system now, like every other faction has, but it works slightly differently. First thing you might notice is that the runes are on the right in the corner instead of on the left, much like normal magic, and this is how it works. Characters with access to Rune Magic can cast powerful rune abilities on the battlefield. After a character uses a rune, it will go into a lengthy cooldown, and all other rune abilities this character has access to will also get a shorter, shared cooldown. These Rune Magic cooldowns are tied to the character which cast them, blah blah blah. There's an overcast version as well, which might do a miscast and damage you, and will have a longer cooldown. So that's how the system works. To the runes themselves, we've got the Rune of Negation, a ward save, 40% damage resistance for 24 seconds, unless you overcast it, which will increase the duration to 40 seconds, and of course there's nothing stopping you from overcasting. It doesn't actually cost any magic or anything, you just have that bigger cooldown on it. Then we have the Rune of Oath and Steel, plus 30 armor to yourself or allies. It is an area, so you will be able to get a few units with that. You can upgrade it, overcast it, to get a greater effect on armor, 60 armor for all units in that AoE. Much like we had before. So those two, pretty much the same as what we had before in the old rune system, but one big change to Rune of Wrath and Ruin. No longer is it a direct damage spell, it's an explosion. To a single unit, large explosion causes fire damage. Yeah, the dwarves have an explosion now, which is pretty crazy. They never had that before. This was always a direct damage and a slowdown spell. Now it is very different. It can be overcast as well to add some extra armor piercing damage. So that is pretty huge for the dwarves to have that, to be able to take advantage of blob situations, something they could never really do that well before. Now for the next one, Rune of Breaking. This will increase armor piercing damage and base weapon damage and give the unit that it's cast on armor sundering. So a good one for units that are fighting more elite units, tougher, heavier units. You can use this, bring down the enemy armor and put a bit of extra damage on them. You can overcast it for extended effect duration. So a really nice buff, could be a good one to go with Slayers when they're trying to slay something large. Next, Rune of Speed. This is a pretty big one because rush dwarfs, potentially. It gives plus 24 melee attack and plus 45% speed to an area. So you can put your entire army in there, cast it, overcast it so it lasts 30 seconds, and speed your dwarfs across the battlefield to the enemy like they're the greenskins. So you can either use the speed to get your dwarfs around quickly, or just cast it on stationary dwarfs that are already fighting so they can gain the melee attack, because you can't really use both at the same time unless you land on the charge. And then you have the Rune of Slowness. This does the opposite thing on the enemy. So it slows them down, reduces their charge bonus, charge speed, and regular speed. by a hefty amount. And if you overcast it, it'll do even more, 60% less speed. That's pretty huge. It can only be cast on a single enemy unit though. A good one for stopping large lords or large units or cavalry, anything with mobility over the dwarves. This will help slow it down and let the dwarves get a hold of it. So yeah, there it is, the new rune system, which seems like a huge game changer for the dwarves, especially in multiplayer. This is going to be essential to bring. You won't want to come into a battle without runes now. Much like every other faction doesn't come in without magic, the dwarves don't want to come in without runes because there's a lot of power here to be used. So you're either going to see a runesmith hero in every army, or you're going to see Thorek or the Rune Lord all the time. But just to be clear on how exactly it works, if we use one of our runes, like so, we'll see the cast time, 3 seconds here, and when that runs out, we'll be shown that it's active, and we'll see a number come up in the middle, which will be the global cooldown timer. There you go. You can see the 60 in the middle that is counting down, and all the other runes are unavailable for that time. Until that 57 seconds is gone, we can't use any other runes. So that's kind of making up for obviously not having winds of magic that we have to wait for building up. You just have to wait for this global cooldown. So you're not going to be spamming off runes like there's no tomorrow, and depending on what kind of rune that you use, you're going to have to wait longer for that shared cooldown before you can cast again. And we'll see when that timer runs down to 0 in the middle. 5, 4, 3, 2, and a 1. Boom, all the other runes become available again. And I'll quickly just show you how the Rune of Wrath and Ruin looks now, as it is pretty exciting for the dwarfs to get an explosion. Here we go. Overcast as well. Boom, just a quick little eruption out the ground. That'll do nice work on enemy blobs of troops, something the dwarfs have never been able to do before. So there we go, the new rune system for the dwarfs. What do you reckon? I think this looks good. Could be a real game changer for dwarfs in multiplayer. Are the dwarfs going to become the new meta? We shall see. So we now have Thorek in the roster for the dwarves, and I believe the dwarves roster overall has also had a balanced pass on it, much like the Beastmen, so there should be some unit adjustments in there, hopefully for the better. And one big thing for campaign at least is with the new ogre mercenaries, if you haven't heard about those already, the dwarfs can now have cavalry in campaign. As they are a campaign exclusive, in custom battles you can turn unit caps on and they won't be able to be used, so not much good for multiplayer really. And there's also Ironbrow's Expedition, a new faction for the dwarfs, so that's always nice. And it also comes with a new ethereal hero, Hans Valhisen, a spooky ghosty thane. So technically a new unit for the dwarfs, but only if you play the Expedition boys. So there you go. That's all of the dwarf update stuff pretty much, and all of the Beastmen stuff as well. So lots of new stuff to look forward to with a couple of these old world factions being brought up to date. Let me know what you think. How are you feeling about the new Beastmen rework? Are you excited for the new dwarf rework? Even though it's not a rework, it's a remake. It's not a remake, it's a, what's it? An update. That's the one. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the future.